internet to Psychologist Casual Review. So today is going to be a bit of a special review because we're not going to talk about psychology proper, but about a book that is philosophical. So it's a commentary on Heidegger's Being and Time by Michael Gelven, Professor of Philosophy. So let me preface this by saying that I am not a philosopher, even if I have had training in some areas of philosophy, like mainly Heidegger and Nietzsche. I am not myself someone who has graduated in philosophy, so take everything I'm going to say with a pinch of salt, as it's my understanding and my understanding of a commentary of Heidegger's Being and Time. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I've always had a soft spot for phenomenology, which is an area I find a lot of interest in, and I found it wonderful. So this was a good start, I feel, for it, because in this book, Gelven is going to explain Heidegger's theory on phenomenology and how, in a way, it's the best label for him, because he says that the problem with existential is that it comes with meanings that were added on after Heidegger rather than something that qualifies him in his essence, so to speak. So very interestingly enough, for Gelven, he's going to explain that Heidegger's philosophy is based in one thing that is at its core, the concept of meaning. And it's a very fundamental concept, as a lot of people have used Heidegger, even people that were very intelligent and very well known like Sartre or Merleau-Ponty, used Heidegger to justify nihilism. For Gelven, it's absolutely not the case. Heidegger is, in essence, a man that promoted the idea of meaning. And what does it mean to be? And that's another very important concept, is his concept of design, being, in a way. And that being is a fundamental question. What does it mean to be? It's not who are you, or what do you do, or what is it that you can achieve. It's about what does it mean to be you. And that's a hell of a premise, because it's going to be the fundamental core of this whole book. It's going to show how Heidegger comes to this conclusion. For him, everything that we do, see, has meaning, and it's a meaning that always needs an interpretation. It's what Heidegger calls hermeneutic, meaning that, and I hope I'm saying this right, meaning that everything has to be interpreted in a special way for it to have special meaning. And nothing of our actions as humans is devoid of meaning. We always do something because there is some underlying effect, cause, or understanding that is happening, in essence, with what is happening. And we can see that in psychology, it's incredibly true that everything we do, everything we live, and everything we experience, all of that has a profound and deep meaning on who we are. So that's very interesting from the get-go, and that was very, very, how can I say, thorough as a concept for me to understand. And what I found very interesting, or perhaps very mind-tricking, but still very, very interesting, is the dichotomy that Heidegger makes between ontological and ontical. For him, there are two ways you can see the world. Or you can see it in an ontical way, meaning that it's the quote-unquote scientific way of seeing. For example, if we speak about the chair, if you go in for the ontical analysis, is that what is a chair? What makes a chair? What is the fundamentals of a chair? But if you go for the ontically meaning of it, is how do you use it? What purpose does it have for you? Which is the way we experience the world in general. We experience the world with things that are already at hand, as Heidegger would say, meaning that we use things because they have a use for us, a purpose for us. For example, if I have to nail something, I'm going to use a hammer. That hammer is going to have purpose for me because I have to do it. So the hammer is going to be ready at hand rather than present at hand, which would be a concept of the hammer. Or the hammer is this and that because it has those elements in it. So it's very interesting to see how for Heidegger, the experience of our world, of who we are and where we're at, comes in the form of how we can use the world, how we can use it in order to benefit us, but also to understand it. And that's very interesting. And for him, everything is based in our experience of the world rather than some metaphysical understanding of it, which is in a way secondary for Heidegger. Not secondary like it doesn't matter, but secondary like it's not like the core of what's happening. When, for example, I'm sitting on a chair, I'm experiencing the fact of sitting on a chair. I'm not thinking about the chair, where it came from, and so on and so forth. So here, there's this very fundamental question of experience that is in the design, which is the being. Our being exists through our experiences of the world first and foremost, rather than something that's more calculated or more intellectualized, which comes in a second time, un second temps in French, meaning that it comes afterwards. So it's fundamentally interesting to see that our being is there in experience. And this is very true, as for example, there's a lot of things we don't think about in our daily lives. For example, if you drive a car, you don't think about the state of the car you're driving, except when it starts breaking down and you're like, oh, hell, how am I going to do? And there, the state of the car becomes apparent. It becomes part of your world because it's affecting you in your lived experience. And it's so true with so many things. And in psychology, it's even, I think, fundamental, as you don't always think about your mental processes only when those mental processes start to cause pain or suffering. Only then do they become apparent and part of your world. Your being in the world is characterized by how you experience it. And that's, I think, a very fundamental statement and very true in psychology, which is very funny because at many points in the book, Gelven wants us not to take away from Heidegger something that's too psychological. Like we shouldn't take away the philosophical essence of what he's saying to make it a psychological insight. And I'm afraid that I might be doing this to a certain extent, but I'm also trying to make of Heidegger something that is understandable to me and also to you. And what I find very interesting in Heidegger's concept is that he also has a concept that is very fundamental in his work, is a concept of truth. That's something that's also very, very interesting, because for Heidegger, truth is not just if a statement is correct, right? For example, if I'm saying I'm sitting on a chair right now, which I am, it is correct, but that's not really what he's onto. For him, truth is something that has to be discovered. It comes from the Greek idea that truth is something that's hidden, that we need to uncover it through inquiry rather than something that is given from the get-go, which is, again, a fundamental insight into psychology, because that's a bit how psychodynamics work, is that our truth, the true nature of who we are, is not a given. We have a persona, we have a false self, we might lie, and all of that hides something that's at the core essence of ourselves. And sometimes we might not even be conscious of it. So that idea of truth in Heidegger rings so true to psychodynamics. I mean, of course, Heidegger did not mean it in a psychodynamic way, because for him it's more about a philosophical perspective. However, I feel that it can really be used in a psychodynamic light, that in a way it's very true, and it's in experience something that I feel is accurate to experience. The truth is something that's hidden rather than something that's given outright. And he also has this very interesting take, which is fundamentally different from everything I've seen beforehand, but he has his own concept of what is authentic and inauthentic. So you know how in psychodynamics the idea of authentic and inauthentic has to do with the self, how we might be inauthentic and show a side of ourselves that we're not really what we are not really, and a side that we hide which is true, or the other way around, like we show something true because we're not afraid and we don't hide it. For him it's not the case. It's not the case at all. For him what is authentic and genuine is us realizing our possibilities, of the myriad of possibilities, our understanding comes within a form of reflection of ourselves and of the world, and our possibilities of action within the world. And what is inauthentic is when we don't think about all of that, when we have an a priori, a world that's already, there's no question that is asked, then it becomes inauthentic, and it becomes something that is not opening but restricting. That we don't think, therefore we go in a way not living really our lives or our experiences, because we have already a foregone conclusion about all of the possibilities. Whereas authentic is the fundamental understanding of the possibilities. And for him, the core element that's going to help us be authentic is death. Well, it seems very bizarre because death is the end of being. But that's wherein lies the beauty of Heidegger's philosophy, at least how I understood it, was that fundamentally the end shows us that our possibilities are limited. And not everything is going to be done, reachable or attainable. That something will cease to be. We, as beings, will cease. And we know that. Fundamentally, at our core, we are aware of that. And that awareness drives us to create, to be in our world in an authentic way, as we realize that whatever we can do, we will do within a range, within a point in time between our birth and our death. And that's pretty much it. That realization is eye-opening, because when you realize that at an emotional level, that death is there, and that you are gonna die, something happens in which, yes, things become more clear. At least that's how I've witnessed it. That things become much more clear for you, the subject, about your possibilities, about what you've done, what you will do, and what remains to be done. So another brilliant insight, even if I'm pretty sure it's much more complicated than what I'm trying to explain here. And Gelven also reminds us often that you shouldn't simplify things, but that's how I work, right? That's my jam, and that's how I do things. So fundamentally, that concept of death is what makes us genuine, but our inauthenticity also comes from the fact that we're not confronting death. We are in a state in which, in a way, it reminds me a bit of Pascal and his idea of destruction. We don't think about, in the case of Pascal, God. We distract ourselves. Well, Heidegger has a bit of the same concept when he speaks about fallenness, and how, in a way, we fool ourselves with activities that limit our possibilities, in which we don't necessarily confront our being in the world, right? But we just we go for a foregone conclusion. He also states that, in a way, we are stuck in an as structure in which a prioris are predominant, and how we interpret our world around us through the as structures, which is very interesting, because it's very true that a lot of things are foregone conclusions, that you don't even think about it. Like, for example, you're listening to me through this video, and it goes without saying that, in a way, that experience that you're having, you're not thinking about your device that you're watching me on, or you're not necessarily thinking about all the processes. It's an as structure in the fact that it's an a priori that it's going to work and that you're going to hear my voice. But it's not necessarily a truth, a fundamental truth, because it might dysfunction. And when it becomes dysfunctional, then you realize that it's what dysfunctions is present, and it's something that, in a way, becomes authentic and genuine. So it's very, very interesting to see that genuineness and that ungenuineness in Heidegger. Also, I need to state that, even if it's obvious, that these are not moral quandaries. He's not talking in a moral way. He's really talking about how it is in our possibilities. Because for Heidegger, what is the main focus is that we have possibilities, and those possibilities are at the core of our being in the world, as we can exert our possibilities or not choose them in a certain way, and that's going to be at the core. And he says that our being, everything that we are, is taken into time. Time is the main denominator of the whole experience of man. But what he's saying is that the time we have is not temporality in what we think like events. It's our experience that creates temporality. In a way, it's time that creates temporality, our experience of time that creates our greater understanding. And for him, there's three ways in which time goes. Of course, it's not necessarily an incredibly revolutionary idea, but it's still very interesting. There's present, past, and future. For him, the two main important ones are the future and the past. So future, because fundamentally all your possibilities lie ahead. In a way that there's always, in your mind, there's always a tomorrow. There's something that's always in the future. Even if you have 5 minutes to live or 5 minutes to finish this video, you still have a future. That future is at the crux of your possibilities. The second most important is the past. The past, why? Because everything you've been, everything that has brought you up to this is in the past. So your whole continuous identity is there in the past, and it influences what can be your possibilities in the future. The ones that are least important, very interestingly, is the present. So this is very counterintuitive, especially if you're in Gestalt or existential psychology, because you might think, but wait, isn't the present like the moment where we're supposed to choose? Yes, but the present is in a way transitional from past to future, but it's not necessarily something that's that important for Heidegger, as it remains that the possibilities aren't necessarily actualized in the present, and actualization is not as important for Heidegger as the possibilities themselves, which again, very interesting, and it seems to me, at least in my clinical view, that is very true, that what imports most and first and foremost is what we can do in the future. That's what we think about. What can I do? What will I do? What should I do? All of that is in the future. What I'm doing is not necessarily that much of a self-reflection at the moment, or at least it's not something that is fundamentally there. And in the other sense, or in the other direction, the past is about what has happened. And he says it's contrary to what one may think, it is authentic to look back to the past as a phenomenon of repetition to understand the possibilities. So again, very, very interesting. And he also has a whole statement on how history is fundamentally important. And it is very central in Heidegger, as the history of shows the design, should I say, the being of the whole of mankind. And it's our, in a way, legacy and inheritance. That history, in a way, made us as the building blocks of everything. We don't think about it. But Heidegger says that we are within our world, our cultural world of today, but it's as an answer to also everything that came before and everything that can come afterwards. So in a way, the future and the past are intertwined in this idea of legacy. It's something that we carry out through our lives, conscious or not conscious about it. Heidegger does not talk about consciousness or unconsciousness, but he does talk about how, in a way, we are influenced and molded by the environment around us, that we're not alone, and that's very important. That even if we experience our lives in a very alone fashion, we are not, in a way, alone within the collective being of mankind. Very interesting, even if Gelven does not dig into it. And he also ends the book, very interestingly enough, by showing what Heidegger did after being in time, because that's another interesting thing I never noticed, is that Being and Time was never fully finished, that there's a sequel that he never wrote, that he was trying to write but never really did end up writing. So very interesting. And at the end he does speak more in detail about how Heidegger shifted for ontology to something more common, for example language, which is very interesting. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Time's up for me. no more possibilities. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.